In occupied Holland, listening to the radio could get you arrested. But families did it anyway. Picture a back room in Rotterdam. Curtains pinned shut, lights off, kids told not to breathe too loud. On the table, a forbidden set hums. The dial is set to one fragile frequency. A woman's voice cuts through the static. This is Queen Wilhelmina, speaking from London. Outside, the Germans own every street. Inside, for a few minutes, they don't own the story. That voice shouldn't exist. 4 years earlier, her car was boxed in on a Dutch quay while dive bombers circled overhead, and British troops were told something that sounded like betrayal. You will not counterattack. You will get her out. On paper, that day looks like failure. British troops land in the Netherlands, refuse to strike inland, and sail away with the Queen. But the men on that pier weren't running. They were trading one kind of victory for another, giving up ground so a voice could escape and keep the country alive from exile. Our story starts on the afternoon that trade was made. May 13th, 1940. IJmuiden, Netherlands. A Dutch harbour official stood on the quay and watched British troops dig trenches in the road. Finally, he thought. Reinforcements. The Germans had broken through somewhere inland. Nobody knew exactly where, and now the British were here to push them back. He could see guards spreading out along the approaches, Royal Marines securing positions near the gangway, proper soldiers, with steel helmets and rifles. The official had been telling civilians all morning that help was coming, that the British would counterattack and drive the Germans out. Of course they will strike inland, he told one worried family. They have to. Then a motorcade came speeding around the corner. A pale Dutch official jumped out and bowed. Her Majesty the Queen. The British officer's pistol went down. Orders shifted instantly. The trenches weren't defensive positions, they were traffic control. The soldiers weren't here to fight, they were here to evacuate. The Netherlands would surrender within days. What the Dutch official didn't know yet, the only victory left was getting out alive. A cheer rose from the back of the crowd. Civilians saw the British uniforms and shouted that salvation had arrived. Then the first air raid siren started, a thin wail that climbed until it was screaming. Experienced soldiers dove for cover. Civilians kept staring at the sky. The Irish Guards fanned out to protect the approaches. The Royal Marines locked down the gangway. The mission had just changed from reinforcement to extraction. Major Joseph Haydon got his orders. Hold the line. Keep the gangway open. Brown hair under a steel helmet, binoculars hanging on his chest, boots caked in dirt. He had about 650 guardsmen, mostly Irish guards with one company of Welsh guards mixed in, and roughly 200 Royal Marines who'd arrived the day before. That was it. Against them, the Luftwaffe owned the sky. German ground forces had punched through the Dutch lines and were closing in. The quay was narrow. The access roads were narrower. There was no margin for error. The Queen had to reach safety. Enough of the Dutch government had to escape so the country could survive in exile. The Netherlands would fall within days. This harbour would be bombed within hours. But first, they had to move an entire royal motorcade and hundreds of refugees through one choke point while German bombers circled overhead. Perfect discipline was the only thing standing between evacuation and slaughter. There was no time for a detailed plan. Barely time to react to what was happening right now. By late morning, there's a rhythm to hope in these streets. People wave at the soldiers because they think an army that shows up is an army that stays. What they can't see are the maps, the ones showing German forces pushing harder, bending the Dutch line right now, in real time. What they can see are the Royal Marines, about 200 of them. They dug in yesterday, and they're holding the quay and the flats around it. Guards are spread through alleys and down the lanes leading to the pier. There's a sandbag wall thrown up overnight. People are basically stepping over it like furniture. The Irish Guards came off the destroyers before dawn, and the Welsh Guards came with them. That's roughly 650 rifles, machine guns, and a handful of officer pistols. It's not a brigade. It's not a division. It's basically a thin lock on a door while someone's trying to slam it, and the wind's pushing it open from the other side. Major Joseph Haydon doesn't waste words. Cover that. Watch that corner. The gangway is life. He positions the Bren guns so they can rake any vehicle trying to break through. The Vickers will control a long lane. Nobody gets down it without permission. The Marines know tight spaces. They've drilled the gangway and the jetty. They know it cold. A young Dutch policeman, red-cheeked from cold and stress, argues the British should push inland. A guard sergeant shakes his head. We hold here. He picks cover near the lanes. If the Luftwaffe comes, and everyone knows it will, men in shallow trenches or behind hard corners don't lose as many people to fragments. If the Dutch motorcade comes back, and everyone's hoping it does, men near the lanes can move fast and form a moving cordon. Around noon, the sirens start again. Dive bombers pick their target and come in. Each one pulls up as it drops, and the ground jumps. A bomb hitting water throws up this white tower that looks almost beautiful for a second. Then the blast comes down on the pier like a sheet of spray that burns your face with salt. When it hits stone or wood, splinters punch through everything, through steel, through men. The first run strips paint off the rails and slams a shockwave through your ribs. The second one finds people. Guardsman James William Hayes is running at a position that's only been there for a few hours. He's 24. Mud on his knees, splinters in his sleeve, staring like he's found his job and he's doing it. He dies here. 7 guards killed in those first hard attacks, 23 wounded. The Hook of Holland General Cemetery opens a page that day. Hayes goes on it. 2 things come out of what happens next. One's clipped, hold the approaches. The other's Dutch, and it's bitter. The British will not counterattack. Fear and anger wrapped together. An expectation that seemed completely reasonable that morning, now broken. Nobody here can see that a destroyer named Hereward will carry away someone who'll make all this pain mean something later. They just hear the next siren. The Luftwaffe thinks pressure makes panic. Instead, it makes trenches. It makes spacing. Men standing in the open at 9 in the morning are prone or kneeling behind cover by 2 o'clock. Some of that's training. Some of it comes from orders shouted right after the bombs hit. Spread! Get low! The German pilots are genuinely good. Their accuracy is real. But the British are learning this place fast, where the blast rolls, where the wood splinters, where fragments bounce. When the raid comes back heavier on day 2, those shallow trenches and different postures mean fewer losses. The quay's basically a hard rectangle. Water on one side, narrow lanes on the other. When bombs hit stone or wood, all that energy travels sideways along the surface, and fragments move flat and fast. A man standing takes basically a scythe across his chest and legs. But a man kneeling behind a chest-high wall, he trades the view for his life. Even a foot-deep trench changes everything. Fragments hit at a different angle. Spacing breaks that habit of bunching up at a corner. One bomb that kills 3 men now kills 1 and wounds 2 instead. Day 1. 7 dead, 23 wounded. Because men are in the wrong places at the wrong angles. Day 2. With the same pressure hitting around 9:30 in the morning. Only 4 men die instead of about a dozen. Nobody believes in reinforcement anymore. The only thing people believe in is the next siren. The mission is getting out. The men are acting like it. A Royal Marines corporal watches civilians crowding near the ladder to the boat. He steps into the crowd and uses his body like a wedge. Line! Keep it straight! He's not kind, and he's not cruel. He's basically a machine that turns chaos into order. He knows if that crowd surges when the next bomb falls, the lane chokes, and someone important gets trapped on the wrong side. About 650 guards on the ground, 200 Marines already here, 3 destroyers coming in later to lift the troops, and 1 destroyer, the Hereward, about to carry someone who can't be replaced. The afternoon wears thin. Somewhere past the harbour mouth, a destroyer paces, waiting for the signal. Somewhere inland, engines and treads grind toward a city that can't hold. On the quay, men refill magazines, relay belts, push splintered boards out of the way. and look for the next 10 minutes to survive. By early evening, the window opens. A line slips free. The bow swings. A country leaves the concrete behind. It's late afternoon on May 13th at Hook of Holland, and the light is going grey. A destroyer doesn't want it too bright. That's when German pilots can line up their dives. But it can't be too dark either, or you won't see what's coming. HMS Hereward sits at the harbour mouth, with her bridge full of people thinking 3 steps ahead. The radio operator is watching signal flags instead, because the radio frequencies are either jammed, broken, or being used to aim at you. There's a Dutch naval lieutenant named Lodewijk van Hamel, Lodo to people who know him. He's tall, sharp-featured, one of those men people naturally follow without quite knowing why. He knows this harbour like you know your own street, where the sandbars hide, which channels a ship can slip through without ripping open its hull, where the German planes always come in from. The motorcade starts to form. Dark cars, engines running, police officers waving people back, soldiers standing at attention. Major Haydon watches the timing, raises his hand, and says one word. Now. The motorcade moves like it's being forced through a tight space. Civilians step back because they recognize who's in those cars. The gangway clears not because anyone asked nicely, but because uniforms are firm, and the people in the cars don't hesitate. The Hereward's captain has planned his approach carefully. Turning a destroyer is like solving a geometry problem. Every second that bow is swinging, the ship is big and slow and easy to hit. Van Hamel is working it out in his head. The tide, the wind, how the stern will want to slide toward the quay. Up on the bridge, everyone's watching the wakes from the harbour tugs and fishing boats. Those tell you what the water's actually doing. Down below, the engineers have steam ready for a quick burst of speed. Up top, the lookouts are calling out everything, every spot that might be a plane, every plane that might just be a spot. Someone shouts from the quay, "Her Majesty!" The cars stop exactly where they're supposed to. Sailors reach out for hands and bags. The Queen steps aboard without any fanfare, because fanfare is attention, and the Germans have plenty of attention to give. A minute is already too long when you're loading the head of state onto a destroyer in a harbour under air attack. 2 minutes is basically unforgivable. The rope comes off the post. A petty officer yells something that gets lost in the wind, but everyone knows what it means. The destroyer pulls away from the stone pier. The bow turns toward the channel. The water starts churning from the screws. Somewhere south, another air raid siren starts up. A Dutch voice on the quay, quiet, almost to himself, says, "God ga met haar. God go with her." The Luftwaffe tried hard, but they didn't manage to hit Hereward. A ship that's turning and leaving wake, with small escorts around it, is harder to hit than a ship sitting still at the pier. Later, a seaman remembers it simply. She came aboard without any fuss, and then we were gone. A guard sergeant says, "We held the lane like it was a road to London." A Dutch woman watching from the rail says, "They did not go inland, they went out." One destroyer, the Queen on it. Nothing in reserve if this goes wrong. A window measured in minutes, not hours. One motorcade that can't stop. A crowd held together by breath and fear. 650 rifles there to keep order, not to fight the enemy in front. The British command had been insisting on a counterattack. Now they have to stand there and watch the symbol of the nation go the other way instead. They didn't fail to fight. What they did was succeed at the one thing that would matter for years to come. They got the voice of the nation to a place where a microphone would work, where it could reach people in the occupied streets. The government is now a passenger. The quay is a throat. Everything, every order, every decision is about keeping that throat open for one more day. Haydon watches the way that destroyer's stern slides as it moves away from the pier. He's filing it away, thinking about angles and geometry without meaning to. If they're lucky, ships will come tomorrow to lift out the troops. If they're unlucky, tomorrow's raids will be worse and the casualties higher. He orders the guns repositioned to cover those same lanes, then tells the men to eat At 9:30 the next morning, the sky tears open again. The trenches they dug and the spacing they worked out today will save lives. When the radios fail, a windmill will become a signal mast. The VIP is gone. Now we find out what happens next. It's May 14th, morning, at the Hook of Holland. Sound carries differently here. A boot scraping on stone travels 30 meters in the open air. Men are hugging the ground now. Yesterday's bombing taught them how explosions actually work in this place, with all its stone and water and sky. Today will show if they learn the lesson. At 9:30 the sirens go off. The bombs aren't any smaller. 4 men die today instead of 7 yesterday. But the trenches are deeper now. The positions are behind solid cover. Men are spread out better. The Marines moved their command posts so people don't bunch up near the gangway anymore. When shrapnel flies, fewer people get hit. Yesterday, one blast might have caught 3 men standing close together. Today, with everyone spread out properly, it catches 1. A guards corporal leans over to the man next to him. "Don't look up. Watch my sleeve." A Marine sergeant puts 2 fingers to his lips, whistles sharp, and pulls men back from the gangway at exactly the right second. When a blast sends water and debris across the dock, the ladder is clear again before you can blink. The enemy is still good. But the British are better at this, right now. In this place. Then things quiet down. The radios are shot, either broken or drowning in all the noise and blast damage. The destroyers waiting offshore, HMS Malcolm, HMS Vesper, HMS Whitshed, are circling in enemy air, and time is running out. A signaller climbs up the vanes of a windmill with flags. From up there he can signal over the ruined buildings and past the ship masts. The bridge of HMS Malcolm can see him even when smoke fills the dock. Here's the thing. When your radios die in a smashed-up harbour, your line of sight gets blocked. Your antennas get torn up. Your frequencies get jammed. But a flag on a windmill vane? That's just geometry. Your eye catches the contrast right away. Semaphore during daylight is simple. Come in, stay back. Danger, go now. If smoke gets in the way, the signaller shifts position on the vane until he finds a clear sight line. Malcolm comes in. The dock gets organized. A boarding party throws a rope. The men on the pier get the word to line up. 1 number matters. 3 destroyers, one after another, get a whole battalion off the pier. A battalion that looked yesterday like it might have to fight its way into the water just to survive. The Luftwaffe counts on terror. They didn't count on this. Organization. Their dive-bombing playbook is all about breaking people up and creating panic at tight spots. But the British use that same tight spot to make a different statement. If you can march, you can board. If you can board, you can leave. If you can leave, the bombs hit water and air instead of a mass of panicked people stuck in one spot. This isn't defense anymore. It's choreography. The force isn't holding ground. It's executing a sequence that gets itself off the board without falling apart. Files of guards step onto destroyers while bomb splashes erupt around them. It's May 14th, early afternoon at Hook of Holland. The quay is a rectangle of stone, scarred and pitted from bombing. The air reeks of cordite and oil. Down the channel, bombs are hitting the water like punctuation marks. Each one throws up white spray that crashes down with a heavy slap. The first guards form up along a chalk line. A company sergeant major walks the front, completely expressionless. "Dress it," he says. The line tightens, loosens, tightens again, breathing like a single creature. The boarding party signals, and the first man steps onto the ladder and vanishes onto the deck. Then another, with exactly the same gap between each one. They'd practiced this in training, how to flow up a ladder, how to space out on gangways, how to board without breaking rhythm. When bombs start falling, those habits are all that keep you alive. The spacing matters, because if too many men bunch up at the top of the ladder, a blast will push them backward, and they'll pile on top of each other. A Marine NCO counts them through quietly, tapping his finger on the rail to make sure nobody tries to jump ahead to help a friend. Rifles are slung tight, packs flat against their backs, no loose straps to catch on anything. Vehicles get left behind if they slow things down. A truck isn't worth a man's life. One sailor said afterward, "It was like watching them parade in front of Buckingham Palace." A guards corporal told a friend, "We picked up our feet." A Dutch dockworker watching shook his head and said, "They leave like an army, not like a mob." 3 destroyers work the cycle. Malcolm, Vesper, Whitshed. One going in, one loading, one heading out. The head count drops by squads, while the Luftwaffe makes another run, and the water erupts in towers of spray. Near misses bracket the quay, left, right. But the RAF is up there strafing the threat and buys them a few seconds of breathing room. On the gangway, the Marine sergeant keeps counting quietly. A guardsman stumbles on the top rung, and the sergeant's hand flashes out, pressing the man's pack flat against his spine. At the back of the line, a company sergeant major touches a man's shoulder and guides him back into step. The line holds. The Air Force that's torn open cities can't tear apart a single file of men walking one behind the other. It can't blow the order apart if the order's already built to take the hit. The destroyer's decks fill with helmets and rifles as the quay empties out. The sound shifts as bodies leave stone and step onto steel. The last man sets foot on the deck. The boarding officer gives a thumbs up. Lines come off. A whistle cuts through the air, and the destroyer's engines churn the water. The ship backs up and turns west. The city behind the quay is still there. The men are gone. The water smooths out where the wake was. A Dutch voice, tired, flat, says, "Gar. Gardan." Almost 900 men total. Roughly 650 guards and 200 Marines moved through 3 destroyers on that final lift. Weeks from now, in London, somebody will speak into a microphone about that evacuation, and the words will carry back across the water into rooms where people are whispering behind closed curtains. The quay is gone. The voice remains. It's July 28th in London, a small studio, packed with lights and equipment and people, sweltering in the heat. A microphone sits on a desk, like some kind of black metal flower, just waiting to listen. Queen Wilhelmina walks up to it. Radio Oranje is about to go live for the first time. She has to get this right. The words need to be sharp and clear. On the other side of the water, in the Netherlands, people are listening, but they can't listen for long. They're crammed into rooms, with the volume turned down low, curtains pulled tight, kids told not to make a sound. The voice that fled on a destroyer through chaos and bombs is about to come back across the sea, not as a person anymore, as radio waves cutting through the air. Shortwave radio carries the broadcast across the ocean. If you've got a radio and you know the frequency, you can catch it. If you can catch it. Neighbors pick it up. Cousins pick it up. Sometimes a cop hears it and just decides he didn't, at least not officially. The signal bounces through rebroadcast chains, some legal, some not, and spreads further. The occupation can't be everywhere. You can't stop sound traveling through thousands of wires and tubes, all working together to carry one voice. But it's dangerous. Listening to Radio Oranje can get you arrested. A fine, prison. Throughout the entire war, that same voice broadcasts more than 30 times, reaching across the water to people betting everything on what they hear. Because hearing that voice means their country isn't just territory under a boot anymore. It's a story still being told, still alive, somewhere. In one of those early messages, firm, precise, a promise that the Netherlands exists and will exist again, you hear someone who refused to surrender, who got out so she could keep speaking for her people. A listener in a back room in Rotterdam said it simply, She is not gone. 4 words travelling backward through time all the way to the dock. It's an answer to everyone furious that the British didn't fight back, who felt abandoned when the ship sailed away. 1 microphone, thousands of radios. Who knows how many people pressed against speakers behind closed doors and drawn curtains. This whole operation, getting the Queen out, keeping her safe, turned into something much bigger. Not victory in the usual way, not armies pushing in or cities being freed, but keeping things going the only way that could work once the front had collapsed and regular warfare had failed. One voice doesn't liberate a city by itself, but it stops a nation from falling apart completely. It keeps people from giving up while others are still fighting somewhere else. What happens is a kind of transformation. The dock becomes words. The extraction, this desperate, urgent military operation with bombs dropping and ships pulling away, becomes a broadcast. The physical act of getting out, of leaving, turns into something the enemy can't bomb, can't occupy, can't control. On the morning of May 13th, a man thought a motorcade was German and raised a gun. A bow, a quick sentence, and it was cleared up. In the end, there's no gun and no car. There's a microphone and a voice. The British didn't push inland and didn't turn the tide, but they brought something out. That voice could speak for the Netherlands when nothing else could. Those first quiet days after. Streets empty. The only light and sound coming from radios glowing behind curtains, from neighbours listening together, from a country keeping itself alive, one broadcast at a time.